Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show. Real talk about fake sports. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. Today we are discussing all of the Week 9 activity of the 2026 season of the Pro Football Sim over at SimSN. If you're unfamiliar, come check us out on the website and on Discord. We would love to have you. So as usual, we'll begin today's show with the stats and summaries from all of the Week 9 games, concluding with my choices for the players of the week. We'll do a quick injury update, look at the NFL standings, and then today's feature is on the trade deadline, which we've had to make some workarounds with, so I appreciate your patience on that. But there have been a lot of big trades that we get to talk about already, so we're going to discuss those, and then we will preview all of the upcoming games for Week 10. So thank you so much for being here, and let's go ahead and dive in. There were quite a few very close defensive struggles that we're going to cover today. The first one, the Patriots getting their first win on Thursday night as the Buccaneers play yet another very close game. This one started off with the Buccaneers getting a field goal after Kingery carried 4 times on a drive for 27 yards. Set up a 42-yard field goal for an early lead. Then later in the first, Max Smith caught a 10-yard pass, and he ran it 3 times for 11 yards, all in the same drive, setting up a 52-yard field goal to make it 6-0. It was 9-0 late in the second quarter when Kingery was picked off by strong safety Johnny Wen, who returned it 18 yards for a touchdown, and the pick 6 made it a 9-7 game at that point. It was the same score all the way in the fourth quarter when Wen got another interception. This one he returned to the 10-yard line of the Buccaneers, and then on 3rd and goal from the 12-yard line after going backward, Oliveros found his wide receiver Alejandro Castellanos for a touchdown, and then Greg Sailors carried for the 2-point conversion to make it 15-9, and then 4 possessions later, after 4 3-and-outs, that was it, and the Patriots had their first victory, thanks pretty much entirely to the work of Johnny Wen and his 2 interceptions, one of pick 6 and the other putting the ball at the 10-yard line. Oliveros scoring the winning touchdown there. Kingery 107 yards, 43 rushing yards, but of course there's 2 critical interceptions, and the Patriots escape with the victory. Moving now to the Sunday games, the Jaguars and Saints played a close game with the Jaguars, winning 13-10. Jacksonville started James Rivera in this game after trading with Buffalo to acquire him, benching Matt Howard. In the first quarter, after a punt return to midfield, Jacksonville scored in 10 plays, with Rivera finding Barry Madruga for a 10-yard touchdown pass to make it 7-0. In the second quarter, the Rams equalized, Landrum finding Gregory Sprouse for 24, and then Josh Bassett carried 3 times for the final 22 yards and a touchdown to tie it at 7. In the third quarter, a Landrum interception by linebacker Kirk Ridley led to a Benjamin Ray 30-yard field goal, and the Jags retook the lead. But in response, New Orleans went 44 yards in 9 plays, leading to a Francis Barmore field goal, tying it once again at 10. Then in the fourth quarter, Jacksonville, looking to take the lead, drove to the New Orleans 28-yard line, but that drive was killed by a conduct penalty. They did get another Ray field goal out of it from 42 yards out. Then later in the fourth quarter, Landrum completed Anthony Danks for 18 yards, and then a defensive pass interference on the next play gave him another 15. But then on 3rd and 8, Landrum was picked off on an attempted screen pass by defensive tackle Billy Smith. Jags would run the clock down, hold the Saints on one final drive, and that would be it. So Rivera 26 of 38 in his Jaguars debut for 214 yards and a score with no turnovers. Macquarie Landrum 116 passing yards, but 2 picks for him as the Jaguars escape with the win here. Yet another close game, the Falcons upsetting the Titans by a final score of 13-9. In the second quarter, the Falcons returned a punt to their own 49-yard line. Then Rashawn Lyons, who starting for them after they traded Padilla to the Broncos, He found Rafael Rosario for a 23-yard gain, and then later an 8-yard touchdown. That made it 7-3 at that point, with the Falcons leading. The teams would trade field goals before the half, including Atlanta getting a 50-yarder as the clock expired in the second quarter to make it 10-6. It was 10-9 in the third quarter. Reimer was driving Tennessee. They got to the Atlanta 41-yard line, but he threw a pick to Gregory Williams, which ended that drive without points. In the fourth quarter, Atlanta successfully converted a 4th and 1 from the Tennessee 39-yard line, with Lyons carrying it himself for a 3-yard gain. That led to a 45-yard field goal and a 13-9 lead. On Tennessee's final drive, Joseph Kale got a 24-yard run to get it to midfield, but 2 plays later, time expired, and the Falcons were victorious. Rashawn Lyons, 24 of 38, 206 yards and touchdowns. Also an important stat, no picks for him. Wayne Reimer, 1 interception, only 75 passing yards and 11 rushing yards. Joseph Kale did add 96 yards, but ultimately the Titans fell short, and it was the Falcons who won this one. In an NFC North clash, the Lions beat the Bears 31-21. On the very first drive, Chicago's Stanley Segovia broke off a 44-yard run, which would lead to a short field goal and a 3-0 lead. Later in the first quarter, Detroit downed a punt at the Chicago 1-yard line, and fullback Alex Harris was tackled in the end zone for a safety, making it 6-2 was the Bears' lead at that point. Then in the second quarter, the Lions drove to the Chicago 25, but Tony Sherman, after a short reception, was hit by Jehu Ginn and fumbled. That was recovered by strong safety Calvin Preston. No points there. And then to make it even worse, Chicago drove 79 yards in 11 plays, including Harris breaking a 34-yard run that led to a Gerald Lewis touchdown run from 3 yards out and a 13-2 lead for the Bears. And going to the second half now, Chicago starting on their own 9-yard line after yet another good Detroit punt. Gerald Lewis threw an interception to Michael Frizzell, who returned it all the way for a pick 6. Jermaine Craig then carried for the 2-point conversion, closing the gap to 13-10. On the next drive, Lewis was intercepted again, this time by defensive tackle Josh Benson. He returned it to the Bears' 35-yard line. 7 plays later, Hansen found Sebi Bizzardo for a 3-yard touchdown pass, and the Lions took the lead for the first time at 17-13. Then in the fourth quarter, Detroit had a 13-play, 80-yard drive. Hansen went 7 for 8 on that drive, including a 4-yard touchdown to Richard Bianchi for a 24-13 lead. Chicago would respond, Segovia breaking up a 56-yard run. Then Harris for another 15. Ultimately, Lewis found his tight end Nick Evans for a 6-yard touchdown. And then Stanley Segovia carried for the 2-point conversion, making it 24-21 with about 10.5 to go in that game. After a trade of punts, Detroit got a good punt return by Tremaine Craig all the way to the Bears' 41-yard line, and that he set up his own 33-yard touchdown run a few plays later, making it a 2-possession lead once again. Chicago then drove to the Detroit 31-yard line, lined up for a field goal, which would have made it a 7-point game, but the 48-yarder was no good with just under 4 minutes to go. And then they would get one final drive. They would drive to the Lions' 41-yard line, but they would be stuffed on 4th down as the clock expired, and the Lions would win. Randall Hansen, 220 yards and a couple touchdowns. Tremaine Craig, 89 yards, a touchdown, and a 2-point conversion. Michael Frizzell with that big pick 6 as well. Gerald Lewis, a touchdown rushing, a touchdown passing, but 2 big interceptions. Stanley Segovia, 135 yards on just 17 carries. Detroit ultimately carries the day. 31-21 is your final score. On the other side of the NFC North, the Packers beat the Vikings by a score of 32-20. Scoring was kicked off by RTM of the Vikings on breaking an 87-yard punt return for a touchdown and the early lead. Green Bay responded with a 13-play drive going down the field, ultimately leading to a field goal. Minnesota would go 3 and out. Then Green Bay, Joseph Garibay would find his receiver Nwachukwu for 34. Then another completion for 11. And then finally a 2-yard touchdown pass, putting the Packers on top 10-7. In the third quarter, Minnesota would take the opening kickoff of the second half all the way down to the Green Bay 21-yard line. And then a single play later, Sinnock found Adrian Daniels for a touchdown pass, made it 17-13. Later in the third quarter, Garibay threw to Carl Frost for a 15-yard gain, and then Donald Galligan for another 15, before hitting Nwachukwu for his second touchdown of the game. They would miss the extra point, but the Packers would go back on top with that score, 22-17. Then critically, on the next Packer drive, Garibay would leave the game. He had a groin injury. He's going to miss a couple weeks for the Packers, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Myron Everett stepped in and then performed admirably in the fourth quarter. He led a 16-play drive, including 4 third-down conversions. And then he also threw a touchdown pass to Nwachukwu, which would ultimately clinch the game. Solid day for some of the Vikings defenders. Barry Taylor with 4 passes defended and a forced fumble. RTM, 3 passes defended and that punt return touchdown. Garibay doing very well before he left with the injury, 256 yards and a couple touchdowns. Nwachukwu threw across both quarterbacks, had 19 catches on the day, 246 total yards, 3 touchdowns, pair of sacks each for David Bookheit and Leon Payne. Payne now, I believe, leading the NFL in that category. And the Packers get the big win, although they do lose Garibay for their next game. 32-20 is the final. All right, if you stuck through those early defensive games, here is the big one, the Rams and Panthers facing off in a record-breaking game that had an absolutely stupid amount of offensive statistics. Here we go. On the very first play, Dupree fumbled away. It was recovered by Darrell Lee of the Rams. But the Carolina defense would get a sack and force a field goal. On the Rams' second possession, Avila found Anthony Larry for 19. He found LeClaire for 42, and then his tight end Slamba for a 13-yard touchdown, making it 10-3. After the defense got a stop, Anthony Larry returned the ensuing punt 63 yards to the house for a touchdown, making it 17-3. At the end of the first quarter, Carolina would finally get into the end zone, Link finding Russell Barnes for a 2-yard touchdown. And the Rams' first play of their next possession, Avila threw an interception to Andrej Harris. That led to Link's second touchdown pass, this one to Fernando Owens. And that very quickly tied it up at 17. Later in the second quarter, Scott Baldwin would score on a run, an 11-yard rushing play. Then Ramon Newton would intercept Link, and that would lead to an Avila touchdown pass to Scott Baldwin from 12 yards out. And the Rams would lead 31-20 at that point. But in the third quarter, Panthers would equalize again. Link hitting Barnes for gains of 13, 24, 10, and then a 6-yard touchdown. And then they would connect for the 2-point conversion. That would ultimately tie it at 31. And then the teams pretty much just went back and forth down the field. Avila to Bruce Dawson for 20, and then a 3-yard touchdown to put the Rams back on top. Link would go 5 for 5 on the next drive for 67 yards, including a touchdown pass to Fernando Owens, his second of the day, to tie it at 38. Rams go 72 yards in 7 plays, Avila finding Anthony Larry for a touchdown pass. Carolina would equalize in 9 plays, with Link finding Marco Thompson for a 7-yard touchdown, tied at 45. Then Carolina would force a punt, but would be unable to take the lead thanks to a Dakota Link interception to Jason Bumbarger. Rams would score 4 plays later, another Baldwin rushing touchdown there. Carolina, though, would get the ball back and would equalize 10 plays, ending with a Kelvin Dupree 2-yard touchdown run, tying the game at 52 all, with still 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Then Avila to Anthony Larry for 46, to Baldwin for 21. He was sacked, and then to Baldwin for a 7-yard touchdown. Just like that, Rams back on top. And after a trade of field goals, it was 62 to 55 with 3:28 to go. Panthers got the ball back, looking to tie, but Link threw a pick six to Ramon Newton. Newton's second interception of the game. Returned it 32 yards for a score to make it 69 to 55. Carolina on the next drive started with 2 offensive penalties, leading to a 1st and 30, which they converted in just 3 plays. They drove all the way down to the Rams' 5-yard line before time expired. They were down 2 scores, so they weren't hoping to win, just add to the madness that was this final score. But it ends 69 to 55 with the Rams winning. So this game featured only 2 lead changes. Rams were ahead for most of it, but it included 6 ties, and not counting 0-0. So once scoring began, there were 6 different ties, including tied at 31, 38, 45, and 52. The Rams had 2 players over 100 receiving yards. Also, Baldwin got 97, but he also got another 13 yards rushing and 4 total touchdowns for Baldwin on just 9 touches. Carolina had 4 receivers over 100 yards. Barnes with 20 catches for 240 and 3 touchdowns. Lovejoy added 126. Owens 113, a couple of scores for him. And then Dupree had 104 receiving yards. So yes, 7 skilled players over 100 yards from scrimmage. 9 different players scored touchdowns. Including a punt return touchdown and the big pick six from Ramon Newton to ice the game. So yeah, absolutely record-setting day. Over 1,200 combined passing yards, 10 combined passing touchdowns. Link second in SimNFL history with 663 passing yards on the day, but it is the Rams who finish on top after a record 124 combined points scored. Whew. As for the rest of the league, Miami put up 55 on Philadelphia. Hammond's 24 of 25. He ended the game on a 22-yard completion streak, which will be ongoing, and he can potentially add to next week. 363 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. The Jets had a strong second half to beat Buffalo, 34-17. Nick Suarez, 23 carries, 105 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, another 75 receiving yards on top of all that. Pittsburgh blanked Cincinnati 51-0. Morris went 13 of 16 for 96 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Also added 107 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown as well. Washington took care of business against the Giants 26-3. Morrison 39 of 56, 434 yards and 2 touchdowns. Houston clobbered Indianapolis 34-6. Travis Neeble 11 of 20 for 126 passing yards. He also added 62 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Denver beat the Chargers 45-30. London 18 of 22, 175 yards and 3 touchdowns passing. Also added a rushing touchdown. Aguilera 114 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, 176 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Tried to do it all, but the team of Denver was better, winning by 15. San Francisco beat Arizona 17-3 on Sunday night. Romero 21 of 28, 144 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and 71 rushing yards from the number 1 overall pick. Then on Monday night, Kansas City beat Vegas 29-16. Chop 14 of 22, 184 passing yards and a touchdown, 103 rushing yards as well. So big day for several of these dual threat quarterbacks, big statistical days from all of them. With all of that said, here are my choices for the players of the week. Obviously, I have to call out Avila for his victory, 549 yards, 5 touchdowns. Apologies to Link. There were some incredible performances. I did have to dock him for the 3 interceptions, including the pick 6, but 663 yards has to be worthy of mention as well. Dean Hammond's 363 yards and a couple touchdowns. Nick Suarez, 180 yards from scrimmage and 2 scores. Walter Nwachukwu, 3 touchdowns. and 246 yards on 19 catches. And then Russell Barnes, 20 catches, 240 yards, a trio of touchdowns for him as well. Michael Barrera of the Panthers had 4 sacks. Richard Crawford putting his name in the record books with 5 sacks. Michael Cuvis with a couple sacks for the Eagles, as well as 5 tackles for loss. Dalek Stenker broke up 4 passes and had an interception for the Jets. And then Johnny Wen pretty much single-handedly winning their first game for the Patriots with 2 interceptions and a pick 6. So, congratulations to these 10 players on being named my Players of the Week. Growing injury list. We're going to add to that with Gordon Wilburn for Denver dislocating his foot. So yet another injury for the interior of that Packers front. The good news for them is that Russell Garbon will be returning. He's recovered from his shoulder injury. So he'll be back next week, even as Nagel and Wilburn are still out. Joseph Garibay with that groin injury will be out a couple of weeks. Good news, though, is the Packers are off next week. So they were able to get a win, and then Garibay will miss essentially 1 game. So as far as your start quarterback going down, it's about the best you can hope for. Not as great news for the Jets with Ham Costa. Yet another injury. It is minor. He'll only miss a week, but they will miss him and McNeil, both being out at the same time. So that is pretty much it for the injury list. Obviously, we'll monitor all these as the weeks go on. So, in the AFC, Steelers have opened up a bit of a lead on the Browns with their victory over the Bengals. Titans and Jaguars are now tied at 5-4, and don't look now, but the Texans only a game behind at 4-5. I do have to point out the Texans have head-to-head losses over to both Titans and Jags. So it's a game behind and then plus a little bit extra because they are currently down on tiebreakers. But they have games against each remaining, so very much still control their own destiny. Dolphins and Jets keeping pace, 7 wins apiece. Dolphins with a slight edge due to having 1 fewer loss. And the Chiefs and Broncos on a head-to-head collision next week. Chiefs 8-1, Broncos 7-1. Chiefs getting a huge division win, but they'll have Denver in their sights for next week, which is going to be a great game. In the NFC, Lions still a game up on the Packers. Packers, though, still do have the tiebreak, so it's anyone's game. Vikings hanging in there at 4-4 as well. Panthers still well in front of the Falcons at 3 games. The Commanders still leading in the East, in front of the Cowboys. And Rams with a nice 3-game lead in the West. Seahawks as well hanging in there and fighting for a potential wild card spot. 49ers, for the first time in more than 2 years, not in the basement. They defeat the Cardinals to move into 3rd place in the West. So, as promised, we're going to talk some more about trades as the deadline is approaching. But before we talk about specific trades, let's talk about the crazy QB shuffle that we have seen in the last few weeks. First, Rashawn Lyons, who was drafted by the Colts, ultimately traded to the Patriots, and then in short order was traded to Washington, who then traded him to Denver. Denver then traded him to Atlanta, where he is the starter for the Falcons. So it is the 5th career stop for Lyons in his 5th season, and he will be starting for the Falcons. Falcons have sent Jose Padilla to the Broncos, where he is presumably riding the bench, as they have Peter London. So Padilla, the first of the big names, at least in this order, to be benched. We also have James Rivera, who was the starter for the Browns last year. They let him go in free agency. Buffalo signed him for significantly less than he was making there. Baltimore had just traded him to the Jaguars for a couple of future picks, where he will be starting for the Jaguars over Matt Howard, who has been benched for him. So Howard's second quarterback on this list to be benched. Buffalo had benched Asensio for Rivera, but now they have traded Rivera, so presumably Asensio is starting again. So hit the bench and now brought back from the bench for Buffalo. Tennessee has just announced that Wayne Reimer will be the QB3 for the next game, the emergency quarterback, and they will be starting Will Outman, their draft pick from Georgia, for the next game. So Reimer has been added to the bench list, along with Padilla and Howard. Let's also put Gregory Taphorn on there, who a few weeks ago was benched for the young Skylar Simmons for the Colts. Then the Bengals had started Donald Gurevich, but then they benched him for Chris Frazier. And then last week, Chris Frazier was then benched for rookie Sean Curvin. So Cincinnati gets on this list a couple times. Gurevich and Frazier now riding the bench there in Cincinnati. So a lot going on. Quarterbacks being moved, traded, benched, promoted. And maybe not even the last one that we'll see this season. But yeah, at this point, 6 quarterbacks benched and 3 moved. So a lot of activity in this QB shuffle as we work our way toward the trade deadline. But as for specific trades that I want to cover, since we talked last, the first big one to mention is Daniel Ellswick, one of the top receivers by overall, being moved to Kansas City, and the Colts effectively getting their own pick back, which they had previously sent to Kansas City. So Kansas City sends that first back along with a 5th and then a future 2nd and Trevor Herrera. So Ellswick has 4 years remaining on his contract. So Kansas City is going to pay him $8 million each of the next 4 years for his services. Still a great deal for a wide receiver that is, again, top 5 in overall. He has been injured most of the season, so he's just now getting started, just now building a rapport with Chop. I'm excited to see what he can do the rest of the season. Indianapolis gets their first back, a couple other future picks as well. Jan Miller was traded to Kansas City. Kansas City continuing to buy. They moved young Chad Dolis and then Earl Lewis over to Washington for Jan Miller and then Kayvon Hose. Miller is in a contract year, so he's going to be pretty cheap this year for Kansas City. But then they're going to figure out if they want to extend him or if he was just a short rental. So far this year, 5 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception for Miller. Chad Dolis was a 2nd-round pick in 2025. So far, he has 278 yards from scrimmage. Does have 5 total touchdowns so far this year and a couple of fumbles. So Washington going to see if they can get him involved in their offense. But Washington getting younger and cheaper. Kansas City adding a veteran strong safety to their lineup after a strong start. Kansas City wasn't done. They talked with New England to bring in Bruce Puello. Puello was a former first-round pick from the very first draft class in 2022. He is also on a contract year, but I believe... his option was picked up. So he's now in his 5th and final contract year. So again, Kansas City going to have to figure out if they pay the young safety. They got him for a 3rd and a 6th-round pick, and then safety Abraham Devy. Puello, so far there's 28 tackles, but no breakups or takeaways. So maybe not the biggest impact that Patriots had been hoping for. Meanwhile, Devy is a former 4th-round pick who's got a nice 4-year deal. So again, a bit of a downgrade for New England, but not a lot of money spent. And then adding a couple of future picks for Puello as well. Kansas City, again, adding a veteran presence to that defensive backfield. The Commanders paid a 1st-round pick to get the services of Sebastian Moore from the LA Chargers. Moore is an 81 overall. 31 years old, though, and in a contract year. So far this year, 20 catches, 249 yards, and a touchdown. Washington willing to pay a 1st for his service. It's going to be very interesting. Now they have Sebastian Moore and Randy Wright, 2 veteran tight ends, but both older and in contract years. So we'll see if they let both of them walk for comp picks in the future, or if they decide to pay somebody. So yeah, going to be interesting. But Moore and Randy Wright now on that Washington roster for the remainder of this year at the very least. The Cleveland Browns acquired Marvin Thomas from the Jets for a future second-round pick. Thomas was the 10th overall pick in the first round in 2024. But the Jets only have 2 receivers who have recorded any stats this year, including their star, Will Huber. So Thomas not been having the impact they looked for, and they wanted to get future draft compensation for him. Cleveland now has multiple young first-rounders on their roster, in Marvin Thomas from 2 years ago, and then Brendan Dominguez from last year. So looking to add some youth to that wide receiver core, and paying a 2028 second to do so to the Jets. Carolina, after a loss, made a big move to get Bradley McPherson from Indianapolis. They paid a first and a fifth to get the 83 overall tackle onto their team. I think this is an interesting full circle moment, considering it was these two teams involved in the Rashawn Lyons trade, which kicked off Carolina's rebuild. And now it is Carolina setting the picks to acquire the veteran, again, the offensive tackle from Indianapolis. So Indianapolis goes from having no first-round picks to now having multiple in the upcoming draft, their own back, and now Carolina's, and an additional fifth as well. And then finally, just before we went to press, the announcement that Don Scott will be traded to the Ravens. So Carolina getting back to the acquisition of picks, moving Scott, who has not had the impact that air raid team has wanted, given how deep they are at wide receiver. That's where most of the passes are going. Baltimore sending a second this year and a first and a third in 2028. So a big draft price. Baltimore will also be on the hook for Don Scott's extension, although the fifth-year option does move with the player, so the Ravens could pick that up next year and possibly defer the big contract. So we will still have to see what they decide to do with that. But yeah, once everything gets up and running again, we'll process that trade and keep things moving. So moving forward into Week 10, we're going to start things off on Thursday night with Minnesota going to Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Eagles are a slight home favorite per the scouting tool. SSCC says it could go either way. And then on Sunday, we have Miami going to Pittsburgh. Another very, very close one. Going to be a couple points in each direction. Scouting tool thinks it's a straight-up pick. Miami, a narrow road favorite on the road. And then also at noon, we have New Orleans going to Tennessee to face the Titans. Titans a strong favorite in that game. In the afternoon, the big game is Kansas City at Denver. Another big divisional test for Kansas City as we fight for first place in the AFC West. Denver a favorite in this game, but it varies. Scouting tool likes them pretty heavily. SSCC thinks it's pretty much just home field advantage, maybe not even that. So it should be a very exciting game there. Also in the afternoon, we have Jacksonville at Dallas. Dallas an 11-point favorite in both models as Jacksonville comes to town with James Rivera at the helm. On Sunday night, we have Indianapolis going to Atlanta. Atlanta a favorite in that one. And then on Monday night, the Rams, fresh off their record-setting offensive performance against Carolina, get to host Washington. So yet again, two NFC Titans going head-to-head. And both metrics think it's very, very close. We have the Rams as a very narrow home favorite. So we will see what happens in this one. Could be more fireworks yet again. But yeah, that is our slate for Week 10. A lot of exciting games coming up, and we hope you will stick around and take a look at those. But that is all the content I have for this edition of the SimNFL show. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by and listening. And as I say to all users in all of our sims, good luck and have fun.